Hey guys, Swim here, and welcome to the deck guide for my Fringilla combo list. This is a combo list that is very much all in, almost to the point of being gimmicky, and basically the idea is you try to get the opponent to pass in round 1 using tools such as Villain Trettenmirth and Cantarella, and if you do succeed in getting them to pass, you go all out, buffing up one single unit, typically a unit on the siege row, although you can operate on any row, and putting a small unit next to that, combat engineering them both, fringilling between them, cloning the strength, usually copying to say 250 or 60 strength units, passing, winning the round, and then your first move in round 2 is to drop a very powerful litho down, protecting your units from an igni or something that might otherwise come, and then just watching as they struggle to beat your 100 plus gold value. This is, like I said, a bit gimmicky, and there will be times where your opponent will have answers to it, but it feels very satisfying to get off. It is reminiscent, for anyone who has been playing the deck or the game for quite some time, of the very old PFI gimmick Adrenaline Rush promote lists, basically. As always, be sure to check out the guide on Gwent DB in the description of this video, because this list is probably going to be updated by 1 or 2 cards by the time you're watching this video, maybe even a little more. But this list represents, basically, it's still the right idea, even if I do end up switching out 1 or 2 cards. Every card here has a pretty preset function. You've got your emissaries pulling out combat engineers, novices, and whatever. Ambassadors just buffing up things, Vikovar novice, mostly cloning ambassadors, although in some cases if you need to find a combat engineer you can clone an emissary. And you've got your golds and some of your silvers, most notably increasing the consistency. This deck is all about consistency. Royal Decree can of course be whatever gold you want, including Rainfarn, which in turn can be whatever disloyal unit you want. Now Fringilla does count as a disloyal option for Rainfarn, which means you can pull Fringilla with Rainfarn, and of course you can pull something like Cantarella with him. In addition to that, Alzur's Double Cross pulls Cantarella, and then Operator, and then usually Fringilla, although if you haven't played Imperial Brigade, it can shuffle between them in this exact variant. But basically, you've got a lot of ways to pull out your necessary golds and silvers to be able to utilize this combo. Anyway, to truly understand this list, you are going to have to see it. So I'm going to jump into some games, and let's see how it does. Okay, first game here we find ourselves in a Brewer matchup. You'll note that this deck is not super competitive, as you can tell by its somewhat gimmick nature, but that doesn't mean you can't win a good amount of games at a very high level with it. This deck is going to start losing a bit of value when people start realizing exactly what the deck is all about, and possibly even taking against it a little bit. Anyway, right off the bat, we've got Letho and Rainfarn, 2 very important combo pieces. We see Brewer, we expect Dwarfs. Now, Dwarfs might end up being slightly tricky because they typically don't really like passing. We're going to get rid of these combat engineers, presumably. We have no Imperial Golems to get rid of, and combat engineers are the first things to go because you typically end up pulling them with emissaries anyway. So let's go ahead and kick 2 combat engineers. And we could get out here for fear of getting golems. We have basically all of our combo pieces. You'll note that Alzur's Double Cross gives us Cantarella. Royal Decree gives us Villain Trettenmirth. So we have basically everything we need. And if we even want Operator, which Operator is typically used for a Vikovar novice here, you give them 1 strength unit, you give yourself something very valuable. If we want the Operator, we can actually get Cantarella with Rainfarn and then get Operator with Alzur's Double Cross. So we can elect to do something like that instead. Now, he hasn't committed any Dwarfs to this round yet, which makes me think he might actually be inclined to pass if we play Villain Trettenmirth. And again, you'll note, it's important to note that we do have the combo pieces necessary to make this work. So let's go ahead and play Royal Decree. Now, we're going to open with the Villain Trettenmirth because we want to force a pass. That's our objective here. And we're going to play Cantarella next for that exact reason. Don't have Decoy here, which is a little bit unfortunate. Okay. So this is kind of our choice between whether we want to call the Cantarella off the Rainfarn or the ADC. Alternatively, there could be an argument for Calveting first, although it's a little early. I'm gonna go ahead and pull it off the... It's Dwarfs. Dwarf players often run Igni. This can actually get a little dicey. I'm actually gonna go ahead and pull it off the ADC. I'd really like to force a pass here if at all possible.
Let us see.
Drawing Combat Engineer. We don't really want that. We can... At the same time, sending it to the bottom makes it really hard to find with emissaries, since emissaries pull the top ones. We can go ahead and keep this for now. Especially since our hand has so few bronzes in it, relatively, because we started with basically all of our golds. We don't want to risk having a hard time drawing into what we actually want. Okay. Can be a little tricky to play this list at times. You need to know basically how to play the first few turns. It can be kind of dicey. I'm probably going to go ahead and open with Calvit here. Hopefully it gives me a pretty proactive option. And of course this list is pretty hard to find proactive options with. There's also a Call to Rainfarn as well. Typically it doesn't really end up mattering that much what we do. Let's go ahead and Rainfarn here instead.
A shame I have no time.
That was not in the spell books.
This is honestly okay. It feels super weird pulling an Imperial Golem like that, but nothing that really happens in this round 1 matters strength-wise. Either he has an answer, or he passes, or neither of those things happen and I just end up winning. So he plays the Yavin. It's going to come out at the same strength as our Cantarella, because of course our Cantarella is buffed by the ADC, meaning Bork is going to go ahead and kill his Dragoon after the symmetrical spy kill. And that's going to be hard-pressed to force his pass. At this point, you might have to try to hope that he doesn't have an Igni effect, because it's still very winnable if he doesn't. That might be my win condition here, since he's not looking to pass, and since I haven't generated an obscene amount of value or anything like that yet. So I'm going to go ahead and play an Ambassador here. There's honestly kind of a consideration to put it between his defenders. It might make him skeptical to Thunderbolt pushing his defenders up, because of course he doesn't want to buff my Ambassador, because he could get punished if I play a Minnow, killing it anyway. But at the same time, if I put units between his defenders, it lowers my ability to Letho to deny them, which is actually something that you don't normally do with this list, but in this scenario, I very well might be wanting to do that later in this round. Now, you'll know he played Regis Higher Vampire, and comically it has 8 points. That is something that is always going to happen with this list. My highest unit, outside of the Impera Brigade and the Nausicaa Standard Bearer, both of which are slightly experimental at this time, is 2 strength. All of my bronzes are basically 2 strength. So, he goes ahead and Marjo's that. He's using my tech of a 1 of Marjo in the Dwarf list, but he did use it a little bit early there, which might be kind of easy to punish. We'll go ahead and play the Imperial Brigade here, making sure to play it on the left of the Imperial Golem, because we want it to be able to get Fringilla, since Fringilla sets the power of the unit on the right to that of the unit on the left. So you always want to play the big unit on the left and the little unit on the right. But of course, in rare circumstances, when you do end up trying to Fringilla the opponent's board, it's the other way around. Since you want, if you're Fringilling their board to reduce their strength, you want the high one to be on the right and the low one to be on the left. Although this deck doesn't tend to end up doing that. Okay. If he drags them to the same road to try to Thunderbolt push them, we do have the Letho coming out, which is pretty powerful. Just play Calvit here. It's going to pull my second Imperial Golem after this. Now we do have Operator and Decoy. Operator in this scenario gets... it has a harder time achieving the value that we want. We don't have a clone that doesn't give him value at the same time. We will be, we will actually go ahead and decoy this. That's fine. It's just a pretty high power buff.
How did that
We're gonna make sure to Ambassador, and we're gonna go ahead and buff this Impera Brigade. And now we have 2 golems, which is actually kind of nice, because in some rare situations your opponent might actually realize what you're doing, and he might have a skirmisher to kill off one of these golems or something like that. Tricky. So, the operator is presumably at the top of my deck. Not actually a guarantee because the emissary shuffles the other one back. So this is going to show me operator and something else. But I can increase the odds of it showing me something else, which is something I actually want, by playing the emissary first. Because the emissary will shuffle randomly back the card that I don't end up choosing, which in this case will be the standard bearer, which isn't actually any better than the operator in this case, unfortunately. It's still worth a try. So we're going to go ahead and keep buffing up this Impera Brigade. He's splitting his dwarfs? That's kind of strange. I'm not sure why he's doing that. That's pretty weird. Anyway, we will of course have the potential to just use out the last wish here. And we find the operator and the standard bearer. Hugely unfortunate because the emissary shuffles the standard bearer back somewhere else. But we can go ahead and clone this combat engineer here. It's not bad since we don't have another clone target. And since he doesn't gain as much value from the ability to use combat engineer for resilience, although if he realizes that you can use the combat engineer on opponents' units to get rid of their resilient effect, he might actually do that aggressively to me. He could use it to get rid of the resilience on my Impera Brigade.
Look what the werecat dragged in.
Interesting. So naturally those are going to be killing off my little Impera Golems, meaning I am now lacking the Fringilla target that this deck needs. And there's no way for me to letho this Fireball Trap without also killing either both of my Impera Golems or my Impera Brigade. There's no way for me to do that whatsoever. If he had put the Fireball Trap somewhere else on that row, that might have presented somewhat of an option. Okay. Let's go ahead and combat engineer this. Our win condition here is basically, and it's honestly kind of strange that he's spreading out his rows like that. Most people play a little greedier, especially on dwarfs. But my win condition here is effectively trying to ruin his resilience. Is he actually thunderbolting 2 targets? Whoa. He's going for pretty low value here. Anyway, I'm trying to win out to his resilience. His carryover right now represents a total of 36 points to my 29. I need to draw my standard bearer to be able to beat his score next round. That's doable. Lethoing his defenders is somewhat vulnerable to a pass. I'm going to go ahead and letho these 2 defenders here. We hope he doesn't pass, but in reality the odds of him passing are decently high. He's a dwarf deck though, and dwarf decks are often very loath to pass, if at all possible. So we ended up basically butchering his carryover. We've got our own carryover of 31 here, which is quite nice, and his carryover at this point is only 23. We will go ahead and pass, losing the round 1 card down, but with a higher level of carryover and a better round 3 plan. And of course, if we do draw that agile standard bearer, we can get game-winning value out of this Fringilla here. Naturally, he does have the combat engineer to possibly try to be able to remove the resilience from my brigade, but at the same time, one thing that he's going to be very much lacking there is that the card advantage to be able to use it after I do, and also he decided to send it back anyway. So there's that. Okay. I mean, at this point, we are effectively all in against his Igni. So we will just go ahead and comment engineer this. This is a very win or lose scenario in this deck. Happens decently often. And if he Ignis us, we lose. And if he doesn't, there's just no way he can have enough power to win here. None whatsoever. I mean, if we want to continue pushing this round, if in theory we needed to, we have the standard bearer. The standard bearer allows us to have a Fringilla target, but it's just not going to be necessary. We'll put it on the right side as a habit, but there's no reason to Fringilla here, and he just does not have the amount of power to be able to beat us there. This is a alternative win condition with this list. Typically, you play for the idea of trying to get the pass carry over Letho combo, but if it doesn't work, you still end up winning if they do not have an Igni. It's a very all-in list. They kind of have an answer, or they don't. Okay, so we go ahead and get into our game 2 here. This time we're against Skellige. We are going to be... We're going to be drawing a hand with no golds. A little bit awkward hand here. We'll have to see exactly what we end up doing. We are gonna go ahead and get rid of the Imperial Golem right off. We have the Rainfarn, but we already have the Fringilla, so the Rainfarn gives us access to Cantarella, which could in turn give us access to more golds. But of course the deck is very combo-oriented, which means it's somewhat draw-oriented. That being said, you'll notice it has so many tools to be able to get the right cards into your hands, but in theory, you can sometimes, pretty rarely, be dealt just a bad hand, and it can be awkward. So we don't need the Combat Engineer, since we're going to be drawing into them with Emissaries. And we can feel like we can go deeper since we kicked the last golem. We are here going to be... let's go ahead and just get rid of the Imperial Brigade. Okay. So we're probably going to open with John Calvite here. Calvite will draw us one of many things we might want. In theory, we could even see our Cantarella, and if Calvite gives us our Cantarella, then it's not a big problem, because our Rainfarn will, of course, always be able to pull that last Ambassador that we need. Rainfarn is never dead in this deck. Absolutely never. It's always going to help you get your Fringilla or your Cantarella, and in some cases, it'll just pull one of your Bronzes, which is okay anyway. So let's go ahead and... On the other hand, we could scare him for Igni. Might not end up doing much, though. So I Rainfarn into Cantarella on his side, and I scare him for Igni. He might pass off the Igni if he... off the threat of Igni, if he has no way to beat him. Because, of course, Igni famously doesn't beat him in a single, in a single card here. So, play the Cantarella here, play it out right next to the Markvarg at 10 points. Find my Royal Decree, I'm very happy with that. And in this position, if he were to pass, my Igni would actually be 4 points down on him. So, he'll probably play a Shieldsmith here. Whoa, that's super risky. He should not be comfortable playing into this Igni. Wow. Man. Anyway, we will be going ahead and playing Villain Treadmarth here. As always, we'd love to force a pass. This deck is all about forcing that pass. And you'll note that we actually do not have access to Letho anymore. You'll see how it plays out. There is a bit of RNG involved, but we are going for a bit of a risky play. He should be passing pretty soon at this point. He almost does not have a choice. Basically, the idea with this play, in terms of committing ourselves out of Letho, I mean, assuming we don't find a Letho on the John Calvite, we thin so much of our deck out with the Imperial Golems and everything that these emissaries pull. Our bronzes are going to be completely empty here, right? Which means we're going to be drawing into basically like 4 cards, and we're going to have 3 draws to be able to find our Letho. The odds of top-decking our Letho going into the next round are very, very high. So we'll see how it plays out. But in theory, again, another scenario where you can sometimes get screwed by RNG. Whoa. He's going for it. He's committing into a round that doesn't actually end up mattering, which is pretty great for me. So we will presumably be playing this. We would not mind seeing that sweet, sweet operator, because it's right under the ability for him to be able to... Okay, so great. So we know our Letho is at the top of our deck, and there's nothing we can do to disrupt that. So we will guaranteed be drawing into our Letho here. The problem is, if we find Ambassador to try to protect this Unvic, it will of course just be dying to the Villain Treadmirth anyway, which is incredibly counterproductive. We can just open with the Vic of our Novice into literally nothing. But that's the way it goes sometimes.
That was not in the spell books.
There's nothing wrong with that. Again, it's this deck can achieve really awkward scenarios, but it's nothing. It doesn't really affect the win condition of the deck ultimately. That's how you should think about it. I mean, yeah, I just Calviated and I grabbed a 1 strength novice. That's normally a terrible play, but this deck doesn't really play normally, right? So it doesn't really end up mattering. Wow, he's really pushing this, huh? Damn. Okay. One problem is Shield Maidens. Something that might happen here decently often. This is kind of problematic. Something that happens here decently often is he starts shield mating this. And of course, if he's running Frost, that means he's always got more. I'm never going to be able to clear this Frost, but we can try. Let's go ahead and Standard Bear. We'll buff up this Lord of Unvic. I want to make it as hard as possible for him to be able to get value out of that. We do have a second Standard Bearer off of the decoy, but basically we are just looking for his pass here. Now, you'll note that this Bork is going to be killing this Morkvarg. The Morkvarg is going to be resurrecting on this side as an 11 strength, and then the Bork is going to be killing the new 11 strength Morkvarg, making it go down to 8. This is all presuming he doesn't do anything to disrupt it. But basically, the Cantarella is going to remain untouched, and the Wild Boar is going to start buffing her instead. Presumably, he might decoy the Morkvarg back onto the right side. We'll see. Ultimately, the Morkvarg carryover here doesn't concern us whatsoever. He doesn't look like he wants to give us this round, which is kind of unfortunate, because it means there's less of a chance of being able to showcase the combo. We'll see. He might not have easy access to another Frost, though, and we do have that additional clear. But that was coming back as an 11. This is an 11. I think he just made a miscalculation. The Cantarella wasn't under threat of that. He miscounted. He thought the Morkvarg would come back as a 10, and they would both die. So that's a little awkward for him, actually. So now I can start buffing up my units. Doesn't really matter where I put my spies. I guess I could put it here so that it dies to Wild Boar. Although honestly, the spy's body doesn't represent too much value here. It doesn't really matter if it dies or not. And of course, we can always protect this Lord of Unvic. Presumably, he doesn't have more Shield Maidens in his hand. I mean, you don't keep more than one Shield Maiden, so he wanted to use it kind of early there. Now, he will decoy that. He wants to put it back on the right side of the Wild Boar, but we will always just block it with more spies. I'd like him to decoy that, personally. Okay. We will be answering with our own decoy. We just want to force him out of this round a little bit, and we don't mind doing this play. Just makes it ever so harder for him to get this value off. And we're ready for that decoy. There it is, decoy on the Morkvarg. Setting up the Morkvarg onto the Wild Boar of the Sea, and we just don't care. We're going to go ahead and block it off with our Ambassador, our new Ambassador, which is of course going to survive and give us this Vic of our Novice target. Now he is going to turn it into a... Oh, I thought he was going to bear that. That's interesting. Okay. Interesting. Now this is only going to achieve a certain amount of value, though. Has a hard time achieving that much value. Now we can obviously buff this up. We can get a lot of value out of doing that. Looks like we are pretty inclined to. Not yet, though.
How did that incantation?
Not yet. Let's go a little deeper here. So it looks like we are going to be going all in here. I mean, he doesn't have a great way to push us into this round. That's growing pretty slowly. We'll go ahead and place this emissary over on the right side so it just dies to the wild boar damage. We do have the combat engineer to be able to secure this going into the next round. Let's go ahead and pull that out this time.
I warned you.
So, here we go. He should not be able to win this round very easily. Okay, he's getting a lot of value there, but there's kind of no amount of value that just ends up being enough here. I mean, given the way this deck works, it just ends up being incredibly powerful in terms of the amount of value you can just output.
Hail Kerzer.
And this last emissary should in theory be drawing us either novice or engineer depending on what we need to be able to take this round. We're not going to be losing or gaining that much value here though. I mean, this wild boar is perpetually going to be, for the next 4 turns, is going to be achieving 0 value. This axeman is going to grow by 1 point in these turns. We are right now 35 points or 25 points behind. Perfect. So we have engineered the perfect scenario. We've done it. Our mission is complete here, basically. So what we're looking at is this Fringilla is representing far, far more than enough points than we need here, which means this emissary, all it has to do is find the last combat engineer. We can thin with the novice as well. It's better to thin with the novice, basically. So we'll novice here, find that combat engineer again. It's guaranteed in this point. Combat engineer here. Use it on this Vicovaro novice. Now, as said before, you'll note we are guaranteed to draw into that litho. We saw it at the top of our deck. 100% chance we are drawing into this litho. This is it. This is the combo. We force the pass, get that carryover. We have 82 points going into this round, and you'll note, of course, it's really vulnerable to him top-decking Igni or Coral. In theory, but it doesn't matter because we top-deck the litho, and we have the play. He has no way to do anything about this. So we're going to go ahead and keep the double cross. This hand looks great. And he's going to do his mulligan, and we go first, which means we litho these, and he can do nothing about it. Absolutely nothing. Now, obviously, he could do something if he had either D-bomb or D-shackles plus some kind of hard removal, but the odds of that happening are generally typically very low. Now it will happen sometimes. You play this deck a lot. There will be random scenarios where the opponent will just be able to randomly have a D-bomb and win the game. But it works pretty consistently, and it's very satisfying to pull off. Anyway, let's take it to game 3. Okay, we are in game 3. This is Eridan. Okay. Eridan deck. We expect a lot of frost. We have our Cantarella, we have our cards, we have the Imperial Golem. We'd like to kick that first, get our Impera Brigade there. Now we're missing some of our gold combo pieces. Alzur's Double Cross is pulling Operator here. It's important with a deck like this to just make sure you have your bearings with your opening hand. And we've blacklisted both the Combat Engineer and the Imperial Golem, which are kind of the no-nos here. So we can go ahead and just lastly get rid of Brigade here, I suppose. Got the Operator. So now our Alzur's Double Cross is going to be rolling between both our Fringilla Vigo and Brigade. In theory, let's say we didn't have Rainfarn here. Let's say we're screwed over and we can't find our Fringilla, despite... And Fringilla is very easy to find, by the way. Fringilla, you can find her with Rainfarn, you can find her with Royal Decree into Rainfarn, you can find her with, either just drawing into her with Calviet or Cantarella, but even beyond that, you can find her with the ADC. And what I could do here is, even if I didn't have Rainfarn or Royal Decree or anything like that, I can just Emissary until I find my Imperial Brigade, which is basically a guarantee, and then I can just ADC the Fringilla if I needed to find her as that combo piece. So we might actually go ahead and Cantarella early here. Don't want to give him anything to work with. We'll Calviet first, since that actually... Calviet will likely just give us a dead card, as it always does. Royal Decree for Villain Treadmirth. Why not? Okay. Go ahead and Calvi roll a decree for Villain Shreddermirth. Pulling those golems out, we're ready to slap this Cantarella out and get pretty good value out of this Villain Shreddermirth. Again, hoping that it in some way forces him to pass. Villain Shreddermirth is the kind of card that often can bait them into passing, although generally not when you play it early in a high tempo scenario like that. Now, typically what you want to do with Cantarella is, in a meta where you expect decoy, you want to play Cantarella last, because people save their spies for the end, for the last turn, so that you can't decoy it. But, well, we also have decoy ourselves. But basically, assuming that he might have decoy, we could save our Cantarella. Found our decoy. We'd love that decoy. Let's go ahead and snatch that up. It's a fantastic card here. Very versatile. Punish him for playing Frightener early, although presumably he wouldn't want to play Frightener this early. There it is. There's that pass. We did it. And that's the power of Villain Shreddermirth in this deck. It just forces that pass. It is great. We force the pass, we win the game. We're basically golden. So let's go ahead and Operator. Now, you look at this play, and it looks weird, right? You play the Operator, the Villain Shreddermirth is squishing it. We don't care. Points don't matter. We're not playing for points here. Okay. So we have basically all of our plays. Now we are going to need to get a unit on the board. Something on the back row. Could start with this Vikovara Novice. We're losing, of course, the potential to buff one of them. But hey, that's okay.
Of course, as you wish, master.
So let's just get this on. You know the combo. We've just seen it. So we Ambassador this a bunch.
That was not in the spell books.
It's all the same combo.
Better off
And
giving up now.
you'll note that we have the decoy, which means at a worst case scenario, because we have the decoy, all we have to do is find one combat engineer.
Your humble servant.
There's that combat engineer. And now we can decoy the combat engineer, or whatever we happen to want to decoy.
A shame I have no time.
Okay, we got a standard bearer. Actually, a kind of awkward draw between these two. Impera Brigade allows this to pull Fringilla, which allows Rainfarn to buff even more. So we will actually just choose the Impera Brigade here.
That is what you folk lack.
Now we can get more buffs out of our Rainfarn, and we can get the decoy out of the combat engineer. Let's go ahead and Rainfarn for more buffs. Okay. Let's go ahead and Alzur's double cross that Fringilla.
Of course, my lord.
We are going to go ahead and decoy this. And we're ready to letho that going into next round. Let's see how this plays out. Depending on the deck and depending on the scenario, there are ways for him to, especially since he has such a big hand. Typically they don't have such a big hand, but with such a big hand he might have a way to answer this. But we'll see exactly how much he can do here.
Better off giving up now.
So we have the letho. Now he's taunting me. It is possible he has something trolly, although he might not realize that the letho is going to be dropped immediately on him in a way that he just has no real easy way answering. So let's just go ahead and drop that letho and see what he does. Now we would like to have higher value here. 89 is a little on the low end of things,
Go ahead.
especially when he has a 13 card hand. But let's see how much value he's able to get. I mean, we've got 89 going into this round. 13 cards is going to be able to do a lot, but let's see how much. Anything we play is just going to die immediately to weather. Let's go ahead and deny him all of that weather. So we've got 89 to his 6. Let's see what he does. And this is what it's all about. I don't know, this deck engineers really, really unique scenarios. You basically just sit here, wait, and see what he does. 89's on the low end of damages though. I mean he has so many cards in his hand. He might be able to do a pretty good amount here. I don't know. I mean his deck though, his monsters deck has a hard time actually achieving that much value. Like most of his cards, like for example, there it is. That's a 5-point Wildton Hound. He's got another one of those. His Aridin is not going to be incredible. At most his Aridin's yeah, at most it's that if he doesn't have the last Hound in his hand. which isn't really that incredible. He's looking to get 50 more points out of these last 9 cards in his hand. Katakan here achieves pretty low value. Biggest thing is that Fringilla, because the Fringilla was pulled out with the Alzur's double cross and has an extra 2 points because of that. I mean, again, his hand is going to be awkward. He's going to have cards like Caranthir. Caranthir in this scenario is a 5-point gold card, in contrast with what Caranthir normally represents, which is much, much scarier. He's going to have some awkwardnesses in his hand. He's going to have more Selena Harpies. Selena Harpies are 6-point bronzes. Like, at the end of the day, 8 cards could actually not be enough here, depending on his hand. He could have Succubus. Succubus is another 6-point card. If he has a Vran or another Ekimara for this Necker, he can get some good points out of that. Okay, that's a 5-point card. That's a 6-point card. He's just playing these low-value cards. There's Crones. Now, that's going to be pretty high value, but he's going to have to play another Crone here. And yeah, as you can see, we are just getting outpowered because of this low-strength Letha. Usually, we're able to get much higher than 89, and in many circumstances, the opponent actually doesn't pass so early. Interestingly enough, it's possible the direction I might need to take with this deck is to engineer scenarios where the opponent does not actually pass so early, and instead I'm able to play out the round a little bit more before I get them to pass. For example, playing Villain Tretmirth so early is probably a mistake. But as you can see, we lost this game. We committed to an all-in strat, and it didn't end up paying off. And that's a risk you take with a deck like this. It's definitely on the gimmicky end of things. Like I said, it definitely can be refined, and I am going to be refining this on stream the day that this video is going to be uploaded, actually. But it will always be vulnerable to just being outpowered, or your plan just doesn't go as planned. But anyway, that's the deck. I think it's pretty fun, personally. It's unique. If it's your kind of thing, it can be quite fun. It's it's not going to be for everyone, absolutely. It's not a hyper-competitive deck, although at the same time, you can win a lot of games with it. When I say it's not a hyper-competitive deck, I mostly mean that because the times you lose end up being random chance more so than your fault, and the fact that as it becomes more and more popular, it will start falling off in terms of value. Right now, it's a new idea. It's pretty powerful because people aren't expecting it, but ultimately it kind of can't end up being super competitive because it relies on that surprise element. That being said, that is not at all to say that this deck cannot win you a lot of games at this time. I think it is a pretty powerful deck, all things considered. It commits to a single idea, but it commits so hard to that idea that, yeah, you could say, you know, okay, but you just lose if they have Nigni. That's true. That is true in some cases. But you just win if they don't. That's the other thing to understand. It's a very, very effective all-in deck, and I'd highly recommend it if it looks like the kind of thing that might interest you guys. As I said before, make sure to check out the Gwent DB guide. I wrote a full guide for this deck detailing all of the strategies, including budget replacements for cards as well. In addition to crafting order for all of these cards, make sure to check that out, and I will see you guys next time.